The sound of tiny footsteps echoing through the marble hallway of the penthouse was the last thing Margaret Chen expected to hear that morning, and it would change everything she thought she knew about compassion, privilege, and what truly matters in life. Margaret stood frozen in the doorway of her master bedroom, her silk robe pulled tight against the morning chill, staring in disbelief at the scene unfolding in her pristine white kitchen. There, sitting at the breakfast bar on one of her expensive Italian leather stools, was a small child, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with enormous dark eyes and tangled black hair, wearing a faded pink dress that had clearly been washed too many times. And beside her, looking absolutely terrified, was Rosa Martinez, Margaret's housekeeper of 3 months, whose face had drained of all color. Mrs. Chen, I am so sorry, Rosa stammered, her hands trembling as she clutched a small backpack covered in cartoon characters. Please, I can explain. I had no choice. I promise she won't be any trouble. You won't even know she's here. Margaret's mind raced. This was completely unacceptable, completely unprofessional. She ran one of the most successful tech startups in Silicon Valley, and her home was her sanctuary, a carefully controlled environment where everything had its place, everything followed rules. She had explicitly stated in Rosa's contract that no personal visitors were allowed during work hours. No exceptions. Rosa, Margaret said, her voice sharp and controlled, what is the meaning of this? You know the rules. The little girl's eyes filled with tears, and she slid off the stool, moving to hide behind her mother's legs. Rosa's own eyes were brimming with tears as she placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Mrs. Chen, please, Rosa whispered, her accent thick with emotion. Her school called me this morning. They closed because of broken heating system. Emergency closure. And the daycare, they are also full, no space. My neighbor who sometimes helps, she is in hospital. I called everyone. I had no one else. If I don't work, I don't get paid, and her voice broke, we need the money. We need every day of work. Margaret felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The same sensation she got when an employee failed to meet expectations, when a deadline was missed, when chaos threatened to disrupt her carefully ordered world. She had built her life on discipline and boundaries. She had made her millions by being decisive and firm. Weakness, sentiment, exceptions, these were luxuries she couldn't afford. That's not my problem, Rosa, Margaret heard herself say, hating how cold she sounded even to her own ears. You should have called in and explained the situation. I would have understood if you couldn't come in today. But bringing a child here without permission is completely inappropriate. But Mrs. Chen, if I call in sick, I lose the day pay, and I already missed 2 days last month when she was sick with fever. Rosa's voice rose with desperation. I cannot afford to lose more days. My husband, he injured his back at construction site 3 months ago. He cannot work yet. I am the only one bringing money. Please understand. The little girl peeked out from behind her mother, her small voice barely audible. I'll be very quiet, lady. I promise. I'm good at being quiet. Something about that tiny voice, that solemn promise from someone so young, made Margaret pause. She really looked, at the child for the first time. The girl's dress was clean but worn, her shoes were too small, and there was a tiredness in her eyes that no child should have. And Rosa herself looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and hands red and cracked from harsh cleaning chemicals. Margaret's phone buzzed, her 8 a.m. conference call. She had no time for this drama. Fine, she snapped. She can stay today, but she stays in the kitchen. She doesn't touch anything, and this never, ever happens again. Do you understand? Yes, thank you, Mrs. Chen, thank you so much, Rosa gushed, relief flooding her face. Thank you. You are so kind. She will be no trouble, I promise. Margaret turned on her heel and strode to her home office, firmly closing the door behind her. Kind. She wasn't kind. She was pragmatic. Firing Rosa or sending her home would mean Margaret would have to deal with an uncleaned house, and she had back-to-back meetings all day. This was simply the most efficient solution. The morning progressed with Margaret buried in video conferences, financial reports, and strategic planning sessions. She was in the middle of a heated discussion with her board about the upcoming product launch when she heard it, singing. Soft, sweet, slightly off-key singing drifting from somewhere in the penthouse. Annoyed, she muted her microphone and opened her office door. The singing was coming from the living room. She walked quietly toward the sound and stopped, hidden behind the doorway. Rosa was dusting the bookshelves, and her daughter, Margaret, realized she didn't even know the child's name, was sitting cross-legged on the floor, carefully arranging Margaret's scattered magazines into neat piles, singing softly in Spanish. The little girl handled each magazine with such care, as if they were precious treasures. She wasn't just stacking them randomly, she was actually organizing them by date, Margaret noticed with surprise. "Mama, this lady has so many books," the child said in Spanish, which Margaret understood. She'd learned the language years ago for a business expansion. "She must be very smart." "Very smart, mija," Rosa replied softly, pausing in her work. "And very successful. She worked very hard to have all this." "Like you work hard, Mama." "Yes, baby, like I work hard. So maybe one day, you can have nice things too. That's why you study, remember. That's why school is so important. I wish school was open today. I miss Miss Jennifer. We were learning about butterflies." "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry, but you're being so good and quiet. I'm very proud of you." Margaret retreated silently to her office, but she couldn't focus on her meeting. She kept thinking about that conversation, about the careful way the little girl handled her things, about Rosa's words, "So maybe one day, you can have nice things too." At noon, Margaret emerged from her office to make herself coffee. In the kitchen, Rosa had set up a small space at the corner of the breakfast bar for her daughter, who was bent over a coloring book, tongue poking out in concentration. On the counter nearby was a small lunch, a sandwich cut into quarters, an apple, and a juice box. The kind of simple meal Margaret never thought about, the kind that someone had probably packed for her when she was young, before everything became complicated. The little girl looked up and immediately stiffened, her eyes wide with worry. "I'm sorry, lady, am I being too noisy?" "No," Margaret said, softer than she intended. "What's your name?" "Isabella, but Mama calls me Bella." "That's a pretty name. And what are you drawing, Bella?" The girl's face lit up, a transformation so complete it was startling. She held up her coloring book proudly. "Butterflies. We're learning about them in school. Did you know butterflies taste with their feet?" Despite herself, Margaret smiled. "I did not know that." "It's true. Miss Jennifer told us, and they can see more colors than people can. Isn't that amazing?" Bella's enthusiasm was infectious. "What's your favorite color?" Margaret paused, thrown by the question. When was the last time anyone had asked her something so simple, so personal? In her world, conversations were about quarterly earnings, market share, competitive advantages. "Blue," she finally said. "Deep blue, like the ocean." "That's pretty," Bella nodded approvingly. "Mine is yellow, like sunshine. Mama says I'm her little ray of sunshine." Rosa appeared from the hallway, anxiety written across her face. "Bella, don't bother Mrs. Chen. She's working. She's not bothering me," Margaret said, surprising herself. "She's quite informative about butterflies." Over the next few hours, Margaret found herself emerging from her office more frequently. Each time, she noticed something new. Bella doing homework at the kitchen counter, sounding out words carefully. Rosa helping her during a break, patient and encouraging despite her obvious exhaustion. Bella making a drawing, a house with flowers and stick figures, and carefully writing, "For the nice lady," at the bottom. Around 3 o'clock, Margaret was in her bedroom when she heard crying. She rushed out to find Bella sobbing on the bathroom floor, holding her arm, and Rosa pale with panic. "What happened?" "She fell, Mrs. Chen. I am so sorry. I was just in the other room for 1 minute. Just 1 minute. She was trying to wash her hands after snack and slipped on the floor. I must not have dried it properly. I'm so sorry." Margaret knelt beside Bella, her executive persona vanishing. "Let me see, sweetheart. Can you move your arm?" Bella nodded through her tears, demonstrating. Margaret gently felt along the arm. No obvious breaks, but there was already swelling near the wrist. "Rosa, get ice." "Bella, you're going to be okay. It's probably just a sprain, but we should have a doctor look at it." She pulled out her phone and called her personal physician, using every ounce of influence to get an immediate appointment. Mrs. Chen, I cannot afford doctor right now, Rosa said desperately. Please, I will take her to emergency room later, after work. I'm sure she's fine. Don't be ridiculous. My doctor is 5 minutes away, and he'll see us now. Margaret scooped Bella up carefully. Get your things. We're going. But Mrs. Chen, your work can wait. Come on. The drive to the medical building was quiet except for Bella's occasional sniffles. Margaret held the little girl's good hand, feeling its smallness, its warmth. In her office, Bella was examined, x-rayed, and diagnosed with a mild sprain. Nothing serious, but she'd need to wear a brace for a week or two. When the doctor left to prepare the paperwork, Rosa said quietly, Mrs. Chen, I will pay you back for this. I will work extra hours, I will. Don't be silly. Margaret cut her off. She looked at Bella, who was examining her new brace with wonder, and something shifted inside her chest, a crack in the carefully constructed wall she'd built around her heart. Rosa, why didn't you tell me about your situation? About your husband's injury? Rosa looked down at her worn hands. You are my employer, Mrs. Chen. You pay me to clean your home, not to burden you with my problems. Everyone has problems. Mine are not special, but they're real, and you're struggling. Why didn't you ask for help? Because people like me, Mrs. Chen, we don't ask for help. We just work harder. That's what my mother taught me. That's what I'm teaching Bella. You work hard, you keep your head down, you don't make trouble, and maybe you survive. Maybe you give your children a better chance than you had. Margaret thought about her own mother, a single parent who had worked 3 jobs to put Margaret through college. She thought about the scholarships, the sleepless nights studying, the desperate determination to climb out of poverty. She'd made it, she'd succeeded, she'd built an empire, but somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten what it felt like to struggle, to choose between paying for medicine or food, to live on the edge of disaster. Mama, look, Bella held up her braced arm. The doctor says I'm brave. Do you think I'm brave? The bravest, Rosa whispered, tears streaming down her face. That evening, after the doctor's visit, Margaret insisted they all return to the penthouse. She ordered dinner. Real dinner, not the leftovers Rosa usually ate, and they sat together at the kitchen table. Bella chattered about butterflies and school, about her father who she missed during the day, about her dreams of becoming a teacher like Miss Jennifer. Why a teacher? Margaret asked. Because Miss Jennifer makes everyone feel special. Even when you get an answer wrong, she doesn't make you feel bad. She just helps you understand. Bella looked at Margaret with those serious, too old eyes. That's important, right? Making people feel special. After dinner, as Rosa cleaned up, insisting despite Margaret's protests, Bella fell asleep on the couch, her small body finally giving into the day's stress and pain medication. Rosa covered her with a throw blanket, and Margaret found herself sitting beside the sleeping child, watching her breathe. Mrs. Chen, Rosa said softly, I want to apologize again for today. It was wrong of me to bring her without asking. I understand if you want to let me go. I know I broke the rules. Margaret looked at Rosa, really looked at her. She saw not just a housekeeper, but a mother, a fighter, a woman trying desperately to keep her family afloat. She saw herself, years ago, working 3 part-time jobs while going to college, sleeping in her car sometimes because she couldn't afford rent. Rosa, sit down. Mrs. Chen, I should finish the. Sit, please. Reluctantly, Rosa sat across from her. I want to tell you something, Margaret began. When I was in college, I cleaned houses too. I worked for a woman, wealthy, successful, just like I am now. One day, I had to bring my little sister with me because our mother was sick and I had no one to watch her. Do you know what that woman did? Rosa shook her head. She fired me, on the spot, told me I was unprofessional and irresponsible. I was devastated. We needed that money so badly. I remember my sister crying, thinking it was her fault. And I remember thinking, if I ever become successful, I'll never forget what this feels like. Margaret's voice caught. But I did forget, Rosa. I forgot what it's like to be desperate. I forgot what it's like to choose between your child and your paycheck. I built walls around myself. Rules, boundaries, efficiency. I told myself it was about professionalism, about running a tight ship. But really, I think I was just scared. Scared that if I let myself feel, if I let myself be vulnerable, I'd end up back where I started. You're not firing me, Rosa whispered. No, I'm giving you a raise. A substantial one. And from now on, if you ever have an emergency, if you ever need to bring Bella, you do it. No questions asked. I'm also going to cover your husband's medical expenses. I have connections. I can get him into a better physical therapy program, one that will actually help him recover and get back to work. Rosa's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Tears began flowing freely. But that's not all, Margaret continued. I've been thinking about starting a childcare program at my company for employees. I have the space, I have the resources, and after today, I realize I have the motivation. Would you help me design it? You understand what working parents need better than I do. Mrs. Chen, I don't know what to say. Why would you do this for me? For us. Because Bella asked me what my favorite color was, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time anyone asked me something that wasn't about business. Because you're teaching your daughter that hard work matters, but I want to teach her that compassion matters too. Because someone should have helped me years ago, and they didn't, and I have the power to be different. Margaret glanced at the sleeping child. And because that little girl deserves better than to spend her childhood being invisible, being quiet, being afraid to exist in spaces that aren't hers. She should be learning about butterflies in school, not learning how to disappear. Rosa stood abruptly and did something unexpected. She hugged Margaret. It was awkward at first. Margaret couldn't remember the last time she'd been hugged by anyone other than perhaps a business associate at a networking event. But then she relaxed into it, feeling the warmth of human connection she'd been denying herself for years. The next few months brought remarkable changes. Margaret hired a physical therapist who specialized in construction injuries, and Rosa's husband began intensive treatment. She restructured Rosa's position, giving her better hours, benefits, and the explicit understanding that family came first. She started the childcare initiative at her company, hiring Rosa as a consultant, and was amazed at how much insight and passion Rosa brought to the project. But perhaps the biggest change was in Margaret herself. She started leaving work earlier, spending time with Rosa and Bella, teaching Bella about technology and business while Bella taught her about butterflies, kindness, and seeing the world with wonder. She found herself laughing more, softening more, living more. 6 months after that fateful day, Margaret's company launched the Butterfly Program, named by Bella, an innovative childcare and family support initiative that became a model for other companies. At the launch event, Margaret stood at the podium, but she insisted that Rosa and Bella stand beside her. This program exists because one brave mother made a difficult choice, Margaret told the assembled crowd of employees, press, and business leaders. She brought her daughter to work when she had nowhere else to turn, and in doing so, she taught me the most important business lesson I've ever learned. That our humanity isn't separate from our success, it's the foundation of it. She looked down at Bella, who was wearing a new yellow dress and grinning widely. A very wise young lady once told me that butterflies can see more colors than we can. I think people are like that too. We all see the world differently, we all bring different perspectives and experiences. And when we make space for all of those perspectives, especially the ones that are different from our own, we don't just become better people. We become better at everything we do. As the audience applauded, Bella tugged on Margaret's sleeve and whispered, "Are you happy now, Miss Margaret?" Margaret knelt down, eye level with the little girl who had changed her life. "Yes, Bella, I'm happy. Are you?" "Very happy. You're not just nice anymore. You're family." Family. Margaret had spent years building an empire, but she'd forgotten to build a life. She'd accumulated wealth, success, recognition, but she'd lost touch with what actually mattered. It took a desperate mother and her brave little daughter to remind her that the most valuable things can't be bought or scheduled or controlled. They can only be shared, nurtured, and loved. That evening, as Margaret drove Rosa and Bella home, something she did regularly now, she thought about how one moment of crisis had become the catalyst for everything good in her life now. She'd been given a choice that morning: uphold her rules or open her heart. She'd almost chosen wrong. How many other moments like that had she missed? How many other Rosas and Bellas had crossed her path, needing help, while she'd looked away?